You may have heard of this little television programme being produced by Netflix with no influence from the UK government whatsoever called Adolescence. It's a little indie flick starring a bunch of no-name actors that nobody's ever heard of. Have you heard of it?
Only from the government.
Yeah, I know, right? It's funny that, isn't it?
I haven't yet been mandated to watch it.
This show about incel murderers, is being shown in secondary schools, or about to be shown in secondary schools across the country, alongside a load of NGO-organised class plans that'll be going with it.
It's about a 13-year-old, isn't it?
It's about a 13-year-old, white 13-year-old, murdering a girl that he was going to school with because he'd watched too much Andrew Tate.
And because he's an incel.
And because he's an incel.
At 13.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about you boys, but were you crushing the punani at 13?
No, I was also an incel at 13.
Yeah. I think most people are supposed to be incels at 13 years old.
Right, fair enough.
So it's a very interesting message, but obviously what's happening is manufactured consent.
Yeah.
The government has been propping up this television show, which is a fictional story about incel killers, and then forcing everybody to watch it so that they can pick up the real-life messages that you're supposed to get from this fictional story, and then we're going to make sure to add in lots of nice legislation against online activity so that we can prevent all of these incel killers who are infesting our cities. That's the big problem that I'm aware of in London, Manchester, Birmingham.
It's just the constant problem.
Is the incel. The incel killers. Or perhaps it's the ninjas. I've not quite figured it out yet. But before I go into the details, you should go on the website, on the merch site, and buy a shirt. This is 100% incel protection. You will not be able to be stabbed by incels whilst wearing these shirts. That's not a legal guarantee. That's not a promise. But I'm saying it anyway.
I think you should lean into you totally get laid. You want to make this like the Link's advert
you'll be an
to get 10 years ago.
Incel wearing this. You'll have to beat these women away from you so that you can try and protect your precious, precious virginity. Yeah. So spend some money on this, please, and thank you. Anyway, so again, the big thing is that it's the incel show. John actually shared this little clip that I think is quite funny, where they actually just mention Andrew Tate by name. Let's take a look here.
I don't know what that is. What is it?
It's the involuntary celibate stuff. It's the Andrew Tate shite.
Oh,
Fucking hell.
I've heard.
And Andrew Tate, notorious incel, that's what he's being charged for in Romania, isn't it?
No.
Not that I'm a fan of Andrew
being a
Tate.
virgin.
Yeah.
Andrew Tate, and they're in Parliament trying to get him extradited to the Britain. Yep. Andrew Tate extradited for being a virgin.
I love that clip because it's just so naked what this whole show is all about.
Oh, yeah. Is that there are people saying things online that young men like.
Yes.
We do not like that young men like this. Therefore, we're going to make a television show where the man talking about this is a big, stinky murder face man. Even though, again, I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate. I don't like him. I think all of the lover boy scam stuff and cam girl sites that he ran back in the day are completely scummy, beyond redemption. But this is not what we should be condemning him for, and this is just being used to, again,
condemning him for being a virgin.
Condemning him. Yeah. I know, it's very strange tactic, but, we'll see how it pans out. And this has been enough because, of course, the incel rage that watching people like Andrew Tate or perhaps even a little-known old 2014 Gamergate YouTuber I've heard of, Sargon of Akkad. Never heard of him either. But watching these kinds of men makes young boys just furious with women and want to go out and murder them.
Can I just interject a second? Because one thing that really frustrates me about this kind of discourse, and notice the way it's incel, it's Andrew Tate, and it's like, okay, they're not the same thing. In fact, they're probably diametrically opposed, actually. But the issue isn't any one thing that they're pointing out. The issue is there are lots of young men in society who have interests, right? Who have personal interests, who have a desire, what they want out of the world and out of society.
Sounds a bit sexist to me.
Yeah, it does. And our society, it is, right? It like, what would young men want? And the issue is that all of society is geared to satisfying the interests of young women, or the purported interest that feminists would say that young women have, right? Now, so what this does is it means that our society is entirely geared towards essentially the left, and anything that would be geared towards young men is just considered the right. And so if you've got like the incredibly left-wing Blairite establishment who are like, no, we just want young men to sit on the plantation, do exactly as they're told, and then essentially die of old age without ever bothering us, well, yeah, that's great. And so any incel Andrew Tate crap, or whatever she called it, like that's just essentially a kind of broad representation of just, oh, men aren't happy with the current circumstances. Well, we need to just stamp them down. We need to get them back on the plantation, back in their box. How dare they say we deserve something out of this society? And it's like, and so from this perspective, I can kind of see why they're panicking about incels or Andrew Tate or adolescents.
Well, funnily enough, the whole thing reminds me of why some people call this a gynocracy. We're living under, right? Because what this is waking up next to your missus in the morning and she's had a bad dream where you did something wrong and you need to apologise for what you in that dream did. I've made up a fictional scenario in which you were radicalised by Andrew Tate and murdered me. How dare you do that? You need to shape up your behaviour right now, young man.
And we've all been through something like that. Where you've woken up and she's in a bad mood with you and you're like, what's wrong? It's like, my wife just calls him Dream Carl.
Yeah, Harry is a bastard.
Dream Carl did this, and I'm like, I'm sorry, darling. I've got to go to work, you know.
I've no excuse for what dream he did last night. I'm sorry.
I can't explain it.
But is that not what we're seeing here? Because it clearly is. And of course, Keir Starmer, being a spiritual woman, has decided that he's going to take the ball and run with this, possibly because this is all just being used to justify legislation the government was going to pass anyway. So on the 31st of March, which was Monday, Keir Starmer hosted an Adolescence, which they've spelt wrong here, roundtable with the creators of the Netflix drama, a group of charities, one of them being a charity called Tender, and young people. Okay? In this, he had this amazing slip-up where he accidentally called it a documentary.
Work together, and what can we do as a society to stop and prevent young boys being dragged into this whirlpool of hatred and misogyny? And it is young boys predominantly in this particular instance. But also, how can we protect young girls that are at risk? Because obviously that's a very strong feature of the the documentary, the drama. And that again, as I say, my boy is 16, my girl is 14, so I'm seeing this very much through both sets of eyes, and that's why I think it hits hard.
He's such a compelling public speaker, isn't he?
But also, what a horrible thing to do. Yeah, so I think my 16-year-old boy might be an incel killer. Bit worried about it. And
my daughter might be at risk of being murdered by my incel killer son.
Yeah, it's just like, God, Keir. What a horrible thing to say.
Well, yeah, basically what you're doing is you're putting kids through, young boys especially when it comes to this, which is Netflix saying that they're going to make it available for free across all secondary schools in the UK through Into Film Plus. Additionally, Healthy Relationships charity Tender, who we'll get to, will provide guides and resources for teachers, parents and carers to help navigate conversations around the series. What this is a struggle session.
Yeah, the matriarchal struggle session.
A Soviet Maoist-style struggle session where young boys are being told the same thing that they've been told for decades, which is stop being boys.
Yeah, you're bad.
Yeah,
and we're afraid of you.
Because boys are just defective girls. What you need to learn to do is be a better girl, which will solve the problem of you being an incel.
Yeah, tell us about
because you'll be so much more attractive to women when you become a girl.
I've not heard that from anyone.
Weirdly. There's a questionable line of logic to go down, but hey, let's see how it pans out.
It's the only way they know how to process people, right? It's the only way they know how to deal with them. Oh, look, girls tend to sit quietly in class and do as they're told and do, they've got brilliant handwriting, they do lots of work. Boys are rambunctious and disruptive. It's like, okay, well, that's dangerous to this order. It's like, okay, but you could also instead create something for boys that dealt with their intrinsic nature.
I think they should split them. I think there should be girls schools and boys schools.
Absolutely.
And whenever that is tried, the boys' schools, they always end up realising that a happy boy is a tired boy, a bit like a happy dog is a tired dog. And so they double the amount of physical activity that goes on in the day, and they get much better results from it. Because they are not the same.
The actual grades go up. But moreover, I don't think that women should teach boys, and I don't think men should teach girls either. Right, I think that actually it should be like it was like in the Victorian era or something, where it's like boys' schools with only male teachers, girls' schools with only female teachers, and this will actually produce better results for everyone involved. And in fact, it is the sort of unisex, modern, liberal paradigm that says, oh no, boys and girls need to be smushed together in the same classroom and taught by women. It's like, no, I don't agree to this. When did we agree?
I mean, that makes a fair amount of sense to me, if only because I saw it many times when I was growing up in school, which is when the boys would have a class that would be mostly boys with a female teacher. The boys would basically go out of their way to annoy her as much as possible, and she wouldn't be able to
Properly control them?
Yeah, properly control them. She wouldn't have a way to bite back. Whereas the male teachers, they could get on with it, and they could hit back if they wanted to.
There's a natural sort of masculine hierarchy, and the older man at the front of the class, you're a 15-year-old, ultimately, it's not going to happen, but in the back of your mind, it's like he could just clip me around the bloody head, and I'd be, burst into tears, right? And so there's this natural authority that older men have over younger men on the basis of size, right? Again, if we can't admit this and we can't do anything about this, then we're going to end up, oh, well, young boys are all evil. We've got to stigmatize, and that's the worst part, stigmatizing half of the children in the country as you're a potential killer, but also telling the other half, these guys are probably going to murder you, watch out. It's like, God damn it, what are you doing?
Also with the dynamics of a lot of young girls with a male teacher, if he's young enough, that was a weird thing that happened in my school, that happens everywhere, where they all start fancying him. That's not a good dynamic for learning either, if I'm honest.
And also, it's like, it's not a good dynamic for just to have in the classroom. Do you really want like this kind of atmosphere in your classroom? No, probably not.
Yeah, it's
not healthy.
It's weird. But so as part of this, these classes where they're going to be shown adolescence will form part of the government's new relationships, health and sex education guidance, which will be introduced before the end of the academic year. Though Labour's classroom guidance is still being developed, it's understood to include content to support healthy relationships, because your school and your government are the first people that you want doing that for you, to enable schools to tackle harmful behaviour and ensure that misogyny is stamped out and not allowed to proliferate.
So is this going to be basically telling the young white boys don't watch Andrew Tate, or is it going to be telling all the young Pakistani boys, by the way, when you're a few years older, all of these young girls are off limits. Don't get all gang rapey.
I doubt it's going to be the latter.
Yeah, it's definitely
not going to be that last one. Although I would be interested to be a fly in the wall in inner city schools in London where they'll be showing this.
I doubt they will.
And
they probably won't even bother.
Well, if they do, I'd like, again, to be a fly on the wall just to see how they all react.
But
They'll be cheering on the young 13-year-old killer.
But
Show the kafir.
But the idea that this is going to work is absolutely preposterous, and it shows to everyone that these people have absolutely no idea how to handle the problem.
Well, listen to this. This is secondary school, but as part of these new guidelines, from as early as primary school, children, boys, will be encouraged to express and understand boundaries, handle disappointment, and pay attention to the needs and preferences of oneself and others.
With content for girls.
With content modified for older children to reflect the real-life complexities of romantic and sexual relationships. So teaching them to be girls, teaching them to be sensitive,
the thing is,
but not in the way that young boys are sensitive, right?
Yeah. Like if you respect young boys for what they are and treat them, as you were saying, as if they are men or men in waiting, then they will respect you for it, right? And that means, getting them to do things that are much more physically active a lot of the time. Things that are competitive, right? You can get young men to buy into something if you make it competitive. And then they're like, oh, brilliant, we're going to win this. You're going to lose this because you suck, right? That's what they're going to be like.
Yeah, you can't do that with girls.
Because that's what I was like at school. And that's what, that's what all of my friends were like at school. You can't do that with girls. You tell them, right, we're going to sit you down, we're going to talk about your feelings. You're going to get them taking the piss out of whatever it is you're doing, because they won't respect it, because it won't speak to them in any way, shape or form. They won't speak to their preferences.
You get called gay a lot.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're going to get insulted. You're going to get them literally winding you up, and they will play elaborate pranks on this system.
Well, that's why I'm so enthusiastic about them showing this in schools, because I think it is going to backfire massively.
It'll be funny.
Yeah. Also, that bit on your list, one of the things on the list was they're going to be teaching young boys how to handle disappointment. Right. That's
Jesus Christ.
That's young men's entire life.
Yeah. Up until at least your mid-20s.
Yeah. It's just disappointment.
One
the whole way
crushing
through.
defeat after another. But of course, it's not just the children that need to be propagandized with this as well. It's the politicians themselves. Femi saying, honestly, any politician who hasn't watched Adolescence at this point, unless they have the excuse of personal trauma, doesn't give an F about our society.
Femi, I'm against your society. I'm 100% against it. By the time I'm done, it's going to have been destroyed and replaced with something good.
Yeah.
Right? I'm against it. Jesus Christ. Sorry, go on. This
No,
really
no,
annoys
that's
me.
fine. Well, yeah, he wants our democracy protected.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing that
Screw
can
your
protect
democracy.
Our democracy.
However, I'll just point out, he is exactly the type of man
Yes.
that they want.
Yes.
Feminized.
Domesticated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, whipped.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely whipped.
But an enforcer of it as well.
Yes.
Oh, now I'm going to go and try and whip other men. No, Femi, come over. Come on, bro. We're not having this.
Grow a set of balls, lay down the law, and then get back to us.
Yeah.
All right? Nick Ferrari, supposed conservative
What?
on LBC, decided that he was going to browbeat Kemi Badenoch about the fact that she'd not watched it, which was apparently a dereliction of her duty as leader of the Conservative Party.
Nick, do you really think that you're melanated enough to be browbeating Kemi Badenoch over anything?
James O'Brien, spokesperson for testosterone,
Same point again to you, James.
yep,
Melanated
saying
enough.
it was unthinkable. LBC posted 3 separate clips of James O'Brien whining about this.
He
He
does
said
look evil, doesn't he?
he really does.
Face.
I'm sorry, I would never recommend this to a normal person, but James, you're not normal. You need TRT, mate. You absolutely need
Hormone
TRT.
replacement therapy.
Yes, if we had your T levels are through the floor, your estrogen has spiked. You need to get some TRT.
If we had a proper base society where you did like a year or two of national service, can you imagine how James O'Brien and Femi would have done in the barracks?
They wouldn't exist. There'd be different
Do you
people.
remember that bit at the beginning of Full Metal Jacket where the fat one's being
Yeah.
beaten with soap because he keeps getting them all in trouble because he's useless?
Yeah, but at least the fat one had
Private Park.
calves. I mean, he had legs and quads and everything. Have you seen his legs?
Oh, I've seen his strange morphology, his
Yeah.
strange shape. Yeah, again, he's just keeping on going with this. Apparently, he must have just spent an entire broadcast whining about it, pointing out, oh, she seems to have believed online racist lies because in one article, to be fair, I couldn't find any corroborating evidence of the actual showrunners pointing to this case, but in one of the articles talking about it, they stated that there were 2 real-life cases that inspired it. The article linked to one of these supposed cases, which was a case of a young black man in Wolverhampton, I think a black teenager killing a black girl.
There was one in London as well, where it was a diverse teenager killing a diverse girl.
Yes, but apparently that's a lie, according to James O'Brien, who said that he hadn't actually looked into it. But to be fair, let's see
I
what...
haven't looked into it. I just know that's a lie.
Well, of course, the online far-right incels said it, so it has to be a lie. But in this Radio Times article, they ask, is Adolescence based on a true story? And the writer says here that following on from some misinformation online about the basis of the hit Netflix series, Jack Thorne has firmly underlined that the series has no basis in any particular case in response to allegations of race-swapping characters, telling the newsagents that there is no part of this, I repeat, no part of this that's based on a true story, not one single part.
Right,
Yeah,
so
Keir
this is a
Starmer-
moral panic.
So
Keir
it's made
Starmer
up.
calls it a documentary.
And Keir Starmer says it's a documentary when one of the writers explicitly says, we made it up.
And so this has just caused a complete moral panic, because what it does is it speaks to the reality that young boys are being essentially demonized in society, and they know that that means basically half the population of the country has got every reason to just walk off the plantation and be like, no, I reject all of this. I reject the Blairite paradigm. I reject this kind of oppression. I reject being feminized. I reject matriarchy in its totality, and I want an alternative. Well, what's the obvious alternative to a matriarchy, right? You can see why they're panicking, being like, well, look, what's the one cohort in Britain who might actually overthrow the system? Oh yeah, actually straight white men, young straight white men, actually, who have got every incentive to do so, and the, I don't know, physical energy to...
Well, and also, I don't want to be even a teeny tiny bit sexist or anything, but it would be the half that actually matters, because I think it's Greenland or something like that. They have this national holiday once a year where women don't do any work. And
productivity gets
right, and everything still happens. The trains still run, the post still gets delivered.
Yeah.
If it was the men who checked out, I mean, how long would this country last? I mean, the HR departments would be fine, but apart from that,
yeah. What's the productivity rate of HR department? That's the problem.
I'd say it's probably negative, to be honest.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
But this article then goes on to contradict itself, because one of the writers says, we made it up. And then Stephen Graham, who's a star of the show and one of the co-writers, says, actually, it was based on not a single case, but inspired by a series of disturbing real-life events, which seems to, again, be a contradiction from the original statement that it was based on 2 in particular. But Graham says, where it came from for me is there was this incident in Liverpool, a young girl, and she was stabbed to death by a young boy. I just thought, why? Then there was another young girl in South London who was stabbed to death at a bus stop.
That's the diverse one.
And there was this thing up north where that young girl, Brianna Gay, I don't want to be crass here, but I have to point out that Brianna Gay was a boy.
He was transgender.
He was transgender. Was lured into the park by 2 teenagers and they stabbed her. I just thought, what's going on? What is this that's happening? So with the Brianna Gay thing, I would imagine, given the circumstances, there was a bit more going on to that.
That wasn't a relationship thing. That was them. That was 2 predatory kids who were just evil.
Yeah, obviously a horrible, horrible thing to do, whatever your ideology. But again, it seems to be a bit more complicated than just saying, well, they were radicalized by online misogynists. But it carries on. The actor also echoed these comments at a Next on Netflix event earlier this year. The idea, quote, came as, over the past 10 years or so, we've seen an epidemic of knife crime amongst young lads up and down the country. I wonder why that is. Who's committing those knife crimes? Must be those ninjas, I would imagine. Again,
it literally is the ninjas, yeah.
It is the ninjas. And you've got to admit, again, the manufactured consent is incredible. We know that there's this real problem, but the establishment doesn't actually want to address who is causing this problem, who is the main disproportionate, not saying that young white kids aren't also doing some stuff like this, but who is the disproportionate people committing these crimes.
I had somebody
not want to address.
I had somebody come back on me on Twitter on that point and say the words the effect of, "Oh well, the Jamie Bolger killers were white," and it was like, yeah, that was a remarkable case. It happened like 35 years ago or something like that.
And one of them is still, John Venables is still basically under witness protection because if he reveals himself, he will be murdered.
Yes.
Yeah. But now it's just part and parcel of living in multicultural Britain. Of course, people weren't too long to find out that there were government connections with this. Charlotte Gill's done quite a bit of this that she's been posting on Twitter. So this is the charity that's been working with Adolescence in conjunction with them. Tender, who did a screening of Netflix's Adolescence when it first came out. They have received £3.4 million in taxpayer funding from 2020 to 2024. They also are very well connected to the drama world, as she points out here. Olivia Colman is one of their patrons. They did the big screening, launched at a special screening at Soho Hotel with over 40 people from organisations working to end violence. That's an ambitious goal, bloody hell. That's huge.
No, just the concept of violence, we're against it. Oh, okay.
The drama shines a light on online misogyny and its dangerous impact on young people today. Tender CEO Susie McDonald, MBE, joined Adolescence co-creators Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne and producer Joe Johnson to explore their motivation, and they will be the ones producing the guide, the coursework and teaching guides for all of these showings at the secondary schools. Also, they've done things like an event in February called How to Be a Boy, Conversations with Men, a panel including Nazir Afzal, Dan Snow, and the Global Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Clifford Chance, and Olivia Colman was there as well. This is the man I want describing masculinity to me.
Teaching you masculinity.
Do they think that
Dan Snow, the ultimate Nepo historian,
do they think they're going to outcompete Andrew Tate in talking to young men while they do this?
Oh, come on. Do you not just see the appeal? Do young disenfranchised boys that this panel has.
They're literally saying, hey, young boys, don't you just want to be basically a domestic pet and stay on the plantation? And these young men are just like, no, I would rather watch Andrew Tate.
Well, I guess we're going to have to censor the internet then.
Yeah, that's literally going to have to be it.
Everyone on that panel looks like a lesbian, including the men.
Yeah, I mean, they've all got their knees together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. Look at, he's crossed his legs like a woman. Terrible showing. Terrible showing.
Atrocious.
Of course, there is connections to Sadiq Khan.
Of course there are.
In 2022, he launched a £1 million anti-Semitism toolkit for all secondary schools in London. Oh, sorry, anti-sexism.
I was like, geez, now that as well.
I'd be surprised if Khan was doing that.
Yeah.
And that was delivered by Tender. And they're the ones, again, doing this coursework. From Tuesday the 1st of April, secondary schools will stream all 4 episodes to support teachers, parents and carers to navigate conversations around the important topics the series explores. Tender will produce guidelines and resources that will be available through the streaming service alongside the Netflix show. Let's take a look at some of
Just as a quick thing here, if I was at school, I'd be like, brilliant. Because that's basically an afternoon off, right?
Oh, yeah. That's like when you're getting to Christmas break, you've run out of lessons to teach, so... Let's put Home Alone on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And this time it's let's watch a 13-year-old murder some girls. Jesus.
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure he doesn't actually do the stabbing.
I don't think you see it on screen, but the whole thing, the most I've seen normies talk about is, each episode's a one-shot. Ooh, isn't that amazing?
That is impressive.
I mean, it is impressive, but I find it funny that the normies that have spoken to me about it don't seem to care about the politics. They're just dazzled by the technical aspects of it.
I did watch a bit of it, and actually the girl who was stabbed was a bit of a cow. I mean, I'm not saying that it justifies the made-up murder, but she was a bit of a cow.
But the point being, though, is that, when they do that sort of thing, it's not like the normie is sat there like with his film critique studies or something. They've been told, it's been done to one shot, and therefore you can think that this is more impressive than the average thing you watch. This is a status symbol now. Knowing this is a status symbol, you're more smart than your friends.
But what it actually does is gets them to be even more passive while absorbing the propaganda that's being spewed to them. So what kind of guidelines and resources could you expect? Well, here's a pyramid of sexual violence that Tender has produced
genocide
in the past. Yes. So it starts off.
Sexual violence?
It starts off with locker room banter, thinking men and women are different, and bragging. And it ends in genocide. So literally, again, wrapping back around to the beginning, this is all female hysterics going like, I dreamt that you did something bad last night, you've got to apologise to me. This is, listen, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. You started bragging with some locker room banter. This is basically genocide.
Yep, next step.
But look, pyramid of sexual violence, and so when men are being genocided, that's not sexual violence. Well, now, when women are being genocided, that is sexual violence. It's like,
How is murder different from femicide?
How is murder different from homicide?
They've separated gang rape from war rape.
An important distinction.
Sexual abuse from sexual assault. A lot of this just seems to be filling up space in the sexual violence pyramid. Wait, what?
Safe word violations there.
Where is
removal of autonomy?
Safe word violations.
Okay.
What does that mean?
And that's one step away from murder.
From gang rape. Yeah. That's one step away from gang rape. Wait, so safe word, does that mean like literally people doing kinky stuff in the bedroom
I
have a
assume
safe
that's what that
word?
means.
I've never done anything that requires a safe word.
So they think if you forget the safe word, you're one step away from murdering.
You notice how femicide is higher up the list than murder, so presumably murder of a woman is worse than murder of a man.
It's always worse when it happens to a woman, no matter what it is.
Yes.
So there you go. Expect this in a school near you. If you've got kids who are going to be going through some of this teaching, let us know how they get on. If nothing else, I imagine it'll be quite funny.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.